Mustard Ollie here. This has been a very requested video of mine, and I decided finally I'm going to do it since I am making dreads anyway. So today I'm going to teach you how to make synthetic dreads. Right now I'm making really long ones, so I'll show you how to make really long ones, but I'll also explain how to make ones of varying lengths. You will need this, which is 100% Kanekalon fiber. Here I am. You can get it at any hair beauty supply store. And it has to be 100% Kanekalon because it seals in response to heat much better than any other fiber that most people have tried. You'll also need a comb. I'm just using this. Any kind of comb will work. Basically, just use the fine tip, fine teeth kind. Something to make your dreads on. As you can see, I have the hair here on this step ladder. I'll turn it so you can see. I have a string tied to the step ladder, and this is where I hang the hair over to work on the dreads. You'll also need something to seal the dreads with. I have a steamer that just shoots out steam. I'll show you how to seal them when the time comes. You can also either boil them, or you can use a straightener, like a flat iron with a wet towel over the dread. A few YouTubers have tutorials with those methods. I can put the links down in the description if you do not have a steamer, but I do recommend having a steamer. This one was only $70, I think. And I think it's the best way to seal dreads. So let's kick it off. I have about half a pack still hanging over here. What I do is I separate the piece of how thick I want my dread to be. So let's say, it depends on how thick you want your dreads to be or how thin you want them to be. I recommend having them thinner because they seal a lot easier and they're a lot less likely to unravel. So this is about how thick I would want my piece to be. This will make a pretty thick dread right here. Remember to choose less of a piece than you actually want because it does usually turn out thicker than you want it to be. Mine are usually quite thin, like I said, but that's just how I like to make them. So what I'm doing right here is I'm making sure there's no knots or tangles in it, and I'm folding it over so it's about half of it is longer than the other half, and the reason I do that is because it makes the dread longer and it makes it more of a taper, so it makes it thicker at the top. Now what I do to make a loop, by the way, these are single-ended synthetic dreads. If you want to make double-ended, I recommend seeing someone else's tutorial because I'm not good at making those. So to make a loop for the single-ended, I just tie it in a knot like this, just a single knot. If you do a double knot, it's not good because you're going to have a big bump at the top, and if you braid them in, it's not going to look very natural, so there we go. It's in a knot here, and I gauge the length of how long this thread's going to be. Again, I make sure there's no tangles or knots in it, and now I start getting to backcombing. Now, this hair might get in the way while I'm backcombing this thread, so I make sure to put it out of the way. Like, I take it off. And I just lay it on the floor next to me. So now we're going to get to backcombing. I use, like I said, the fine tooth part of the comb. And what I do is I smooth it out like this with my hands. And you should get used to doing this while you're backcombing because it makes the dread a lot more uniform and a lot less tangly. So you just go like this. You start at the top and then work your way down like this. And then smooth it out again. And then back to the top. And smooth it out as you go as well. The thing with backcombing is it takes a lot of practice to do. It's more of a by feel kind of thing. So once you get the feel for it, it'll be a lot easier and like second nature. But for the time being, it's going to be difficult at first, but you'll get used to it. And one thing to make sure is that you make sure the biggest part of your dread, when you feel the fattest part, should be at the top and it should go gradually slimmer. Like that's what you're going for. Obviously, it's not always going to turn out that way. All your dreads aren't going to be perfect, but it's something to practice with, so. Like I said, I take breaks just to smooth it out, just to make sure there aren't as many knots and lumps in the dreads because that's something you don't want. This is quite a long process, especially to make long dreads like this. Backcombing usually takes about 20 minutes to 30 minutes per dread. And if I'm making dreads for my whole head, which is about 60, that takes a very long time. So I'm just going to let you know it's a very time-consuming process, and that's why a lot of people would rather buy dreads online. But it's a lot cheaper to make them yourself, although it is a lot harder to do. Now, if you do come across a tangle or a lump in your dread, what you want to do is just try to smooth and detangle it as much as you can by like flattening out the dread and smoothing it out. If you can't fully get it out, then just try to blend it in as much as possible, because lumpy dreads are not attractive dreads. And as you keep going down, it's going to bunch up like this, and that's no problem. Just remember try not to make any lumps when you go down, and just smooth it out like so. As you can see, it's getting a lot fluffier. And sometimes you get something like this where there's a bigger lump going more towards the bottom, like it gets skinnier and then it gets fatter again. Just try to push this fatter part all the way as close to the top as you possibly can. Again, this might not make sense the way I'm saying it right now, but once you get a feel for backcombing, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the test I do to make sure that the dread backcombing is going along well is that I'll put my finger under the base like this, and I'll lift it, and this part from here to here that stands up on its own, that means that this is a good backcomb. So once it stands up all on its own all the way to the end, that's how you'll know your dread is backcombed well. So I'll see you guys when I'm done this backcomb. Now once you get to the end, you could get a few lumps and bumps here and there, and you might notice that the hair might be breaking off a little bit, but that's perfectly normal. It's part of the backcombing process. So I like to pull off whatever parts have broken off, because if you don't pull them off now, they're just going to come off when you're sealing anyways, and that's just a big inconvenience. So I make sure it's all uniform all the way to the end. I make sure it stands up like this. And I'm backcombing the end a little more because I found a few knots here. I don't want it to be lumpy. And there's the dread. That's how it looks after it's backcombed. Now, if you want to keep your dreads at this length, which is a pretty standard length, you could just seal them right here. But I'm going to do a technique that I just coined myself, even though I probably didn't make it up. It's how you make transitional dreads, basically, but I'm doing it with the same color just to add a bit of length. So I'll show you how to do this. I take another piece of black hair, but this time it's going to be about 1/4 of the width of the piece that I took for this part. So it's going to be quite small. I'm going to take a tail comb, or you can use a pencil, anything just with a little pointy bit like this. I try to find the spot in the dread where it's still kind of strong. Like right about here is good. I poke a hole through the middle, like this. And then I try to wiggle the tail comb so the hole gets a little bit bigger. So you can see my fingers poking through there, kind of. Yeah. So then, once this hole is big enough, I take this piece of hair, fold it in half, so it makes a loop like this, and then I stick this loop through the hole. See, like that. So it's through this part of the dread. Then I put my finger through this loop, and I just pull one of the sides out, if you know what I mean, like this. So it's sticking through the dread like this. and I fold it in half like I did with the first piece. See? And then I backcomb it more. So I take this second piece that's attached, I backcomb it into the first piece, and then I backcomb this piece, so the dread will be about twice as long as it was before. That's how I do longer dreads. So I just figured out how to do this myself. I'm actually really glad I did, because I had no idea how to make the dreads any longer than this, basically. So I could just keep going and make dreads to the floor if I wanted to. But I'm just going to do this maybe once more after this, like just 3 different pieces of hair. So these dreads will be nice and long. And when I do this, I grab both pieces of hair at the same time and backcomb them together to make sure they're nice and they hold together while I'm sealing them, so they don't unravel after I wear them for a little while. So I think this is about a good length. That's how long it is. Usually, or sometimes, I put a 3rd piece of hair in there to make it even longer, but I think this one is long enough. And that's about it. I go along, in case you didn't hear me when the steamer was on, I go along every single side. I go down, and then I go back up, and then back down. I hold it for a few seconds to make sure the steam cools, and it should stay like that. Now, I just want to continue from where I left off and keep on twisting. Just try your best to watch my hands and try to do what I do when you're making your dreads. Like I said, it's not really something you can explain, but it's something you learn as you go. But hopefully this will help a little bit. The steamer's already plugged in, it's nice and warmed up. So yeah, what you want to do, this again is something you'll need to know by feel. Because it's really, it gets difficult at first, but it gets easier as you go on. This is just how you twist. Now, you want to grab the dread by the base here where you made that knot, and you want to twist over like this with your hands. Make this motion. It's really hard to explain. I'm trying as best that I can, but you want to layer over the hair and like hide the knots as much as possible, even though there shouldn't be very many. Just twist it until it makes a nice uniform shape like this. And then don't twist the whole thing all the way from top to bottom. Just do it a little bit at a time, because especially for these, because they're really long dreads. I do it usually to about there. And then I hold the trigger on my steamer. This might get a little loud. The steam starts to come out and it makes this hissing noise. So I put it as close to the dread, not directly on it. And I go down slowly. And I go back up. And I go along the sides. There is good, and now I'm going to go back with my steamer. Again, sorry for the loudness. And that's how that looks. Now, this is a little bit of a secret that I do. I take my lighter. This is how you seal the ends, and I hold it right under the end until the hair separates, like that. Because it's plastic, it'll melt and naturally just fall off like that. And then I take the end again. I hold the lighter up to the end until it shrinks a little bit. And then I roll it with my fingers. Now, my fingers are probably used to this because I've been doing this for years. It might be a little bit hot for you guys, so you could skip this step if you want, but that makes a very nice end, as you can see. Now, another thing that I do is I go along the entire dread with my lighter, just underneath. It should not be touching the dread, because then it'll get all hard and plasticky and disgusting. That seals up any loose hairs that might be showing. As you can see, it's kind of scraggly looking. So I just hold it really tight like this, and I just go like this. Just really fast so the hair melts into the dread, but it doesn't get all plasticky and disgusting. As you can see, it's a lot cleaner now. And that's about it. As you can see, this dread is very thin, it's very long, but that's how I like to make my dreads. To take them off, I just untie this string right here, and I pull off the loop. As you can see, here's the tiny little loop, and here's the dread. I already made a bunch last month that are really long. I could just add this to the pile. There are about maybe 50 here, and this is how they look. This is how they look after they've been worn for a while. So yeah, that's how you make regular single-ended synthetic dreads. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!